ready to ignite. Untold stories in the airways, flying through the night. Experience voices, tales so bold. Streaming live, the truth unfolds. Untold Radio Network, where secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, it's so I remember right. Share and subscribe, join the side where truth can't hide. Aliens in the attic, UFOs in the sky. Cryptids lurking, oh my, ghosts in the hallway whispering your name. The paranormal, the unexplained. Become a VIP, get the inside scoop. Unlock the mysteries, be part of the group. Live streaming stories, they're talking to you. Super chats buzzing, join the crew. Untold Radio Network, where secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, it's a wild member. Share and subscribe, on the side where truth can hide. So if you've got the guts and you want to explore, tune into the Untold, it's what you're looking for. From aliens to ghosts and all that's unseen. Untold Radio Network, where the world's mysteries convene.
The paranormal, UFOs, monsters, mysteries. You're listening to Talking Weird. And now, from a cabin deep in the Northwoods, your host, Dr. Dean Bertram.
Greetings, all my fellow weirdos and weirdettes. Welcome to Talking Weird on the Untold Radio Network. I'm your host, Dean Bertram, and as always, I'm delighted that you're joining me tonight, whether you're watching it when it goes out on YouTube and X and Facebook at 9 p.m. Central, or whether you're watching it on one of those shows archived after that date and time, or maybe you're listening to us on one of the many podcast platforms that this show goes out on the following day. Greetings and welcome. Thank you for spending the next hour or so of your life with me. I really appreciate it. We're going to be jumping into our guest in a minute soon. In the meantime, I'd like to say I hope everybody is enjoying the summer, and it's already racing past. And before we know it, it's going to be September. And that means for me, and for hopefully many of you who hopefully will come, to the Crossing Realms Conference in Richmond, Missouri, which is September 19 to 20. The Untold Radio Network is one of the major sponsors of that event, and I will be there screening my short documentary, The Shaver Mystery, which is kind of a standalone segment for my upcoming feature documentary, The Man Who Invented Flying Saucers, which is about Raymond A. Palmer, Richard Shaver, and the creation of modern UFO belief. There's also a bunch of fantastic guests. The conference is run by a number of people probably many listeners know to, because they're all in this space. You might remember Jason McLean, who now runs the Siru Papers and used to be my co-host on Mysterious Library, which was also on the Talking Weird Network. You probably know Tex. You very well may know Donnie Cho, who has his wonderful show. Donnie Cho, what is it? I should know. Donnie Cho says something, I think. Anyway, it's hilarious. No, something like that. It's hilarious anyway, Donnie Cho show. He's been on the show here, Talking Weird. He's been on a couple times. And of course, Bigfoot Michigan Rob, who is one of the presenters of that festival as well. They'll all be at the Crossing Realms Conference. And I'll play a little promo video for you guys now to encourage you to race out there and buy tickets and come and see me. And there's a plethora of guests there. Like go and check it out. Follow the directions on this little promo. And I hope to see you at Crossing Realms this September.
Crossing Realms Conference is coming this September 19th and 20th to the Eagleton Civic Center in Richmond, Missouri. Tickets to this landmark event are on sale right now at Eventbrite. The powerful speaker lineup will cover topics from Bigfoot, UFOs, and aliens, so you will not want to miss attending this amazing 2-day inaugural event. Again, that's the Crossing Realms Conference, this September 19th and 20th at the Eagleton Civic Center in Richmond, Missouri. Please mark your calendar and get your tickets before they vanish. Space is limited.
So many of the people putting that show together, as I mentioned, are friends of mine and some of my favorite people in the paranormal and cryptozoological space. I'm delighted tonight that I have another one of my favorite individuals who operates in this space that we're all, I suppose, obsessed with or interested in and spend so much time thinking about. I know that I do. She's been a guest on the show before. I'm so happy to have her back. She's been involved in the world of paranormal investigation and paranormal phenomenon for 20 years. Her story began with her great-great-grandfather, Dr. Albert Durrant Watson, who was the president of the Association for Psychical Research of Canada in 1918, which was one of the first paranormal associations developed in Canadian history. Co-founding and leading Entityseeker Paranormal Research and Teachings in 2003, her experiences and knowledge has led to researching and co-creating a unique investigative program called Teaching the Living, and subsequently has been featured on and hosted numerous specials and TV shows. There's really too many to mention here. I'd be rambling about it for the next 5 minutes. But she's also a producer for various podcasts and television projects, both nationally and internationally. Her work has been presented at the Rhine Research Center, and she is a host and featured presenter at the Parapsychological Association. She has taught her program in parapsychology, Teaching the Living, at various post-secondary institutions in Canada, including 15 years as a guest professor at Norquest College in the psychology social work programs. She's a regular contributor to the excellent UK's Haunted magazine, which can be found on newsstands internationally. She can also be heard on her own excellent podcast, Supernatural Circumstances, which I've been very fortunate enough to be a guest on a couple of times, and I love being on that podcast. You should go and listen to it. Go and look for Supernatural Circumstances. It's amazing. It delves into the mysterious, the spiritual, and the fascinating things in our universe. So I'm absolutely delighted to welcome back to Talking Weird my good friend Morgan Knudsen.
Hey, Dean, it's so good to see you.
It's great to have you back. It's been too long since we've chatted on either your show or my show.
Oh gosh, it has. It's always too long. No, this is great. Thank you for having me.
No, it's so good to have you. I was just saying in your intro, people should really go and check out Supernatural Circumstances. How do they do that? And tell us a little bit about the show and how it came to being and where they can go and listen to it.
Absolutely. So this was really a passion project co-created by myself and Mike Brown, who used to co-host. And the whole idea behind it was to eliminate the bull from this information and to really get to the nitty-gritty of where science sits with the evolution of parapsychology, the paranormal. What does science actually think about this? And to bring on the best minds to talk about some of the strangest cases, some of the amazing advancements that are coming forward, and to just get past the television, the silliness that goes on with some of the ghost hunting shows, although they can be really, really fun. We wanted to take it a lot further. And that's what Supernatural Circumstances is about. It's about taking that discussion to the next level with real people, real scientists, real minds that can actually come and dissect what's happening. It's so exciting to be a part of.
I love how serious you take it. And I love how, as you said, it avoids those kind of silly, tropes and the silliness of so much of the material which is created in this space. Unfortunately, I think if it isn't that it can't be interesting, because your show always is, but when these things drift towards complete entertainment, when infotainment becomes just entertainment and there isn't even any valuable information in there anymore, then we have a problem, I think.
Absolutely. And my goal has always been to allow people to take this journey with me, because I don't have all the answers. Nobody's got all the answers, but we can piece together what's going on. Like very recently we had on Mike Rixicker, who's going to be actually on the next episode. Many people will remember him from Ancient Aliens and the Unexplained, talking about the incredible discoveries that are happening underneath the pyramids right now, and these vast cities that are just being uncovered. And what the heck is going on? Why isn't it in the media? Why isn't this something that is this life-changing information is now essentially being buried, and we're going to be talking about that. So we cover a plethora of stuff, and we just have on the best people to do it, and it's so interesting. I learn something every single time I do a show.
Yeah, I think that's what makes it valuable doing what you and I do, is when you can talk to people that enrich you as well as enrich your audience.
Oh my gosh, I have learned so much, because, and I try to have people on in subjects that I might be lacking in, because I always walk away going, I can't believe this is what's happening. We recently had on a good friend of mine, Mark Bacuzzi from the Rhine Research Center, talking about AI and mediumship. What does AI then mean for mediums, and can it be used as an interface to sort of eliminate that human component of screwing things up, essentially, or bias? So, I mean, we've had some seriously thought-provoking discussions, and it's just an adventure. It's just every single episode is an adventure, and I'm just really happy to be a part of it.
Well, given that it's Canada Day today, when folks are listening to this, happy Canada Day to you firstly, because that's where you're joining us from. That's your country. You suggested, and I thought it was a wonderful idea, that we would look at Canadian cryptids and Canadian folklore today.
Yeah, because I mean, Canada's not something that's often talked about a lot when it comes to this stuff. And part of that is because Canadians tend to just be a little bit more on the, I guess, the shy side about discussing this subject. We've got a long history of it, just as deep and as fascinating as other countries. But for some reason, there's a bit of a cultural barrier, I think, with a lot of people that don't want to talk about it. Everybody's had experiences, but everybody just kind of, they want to discuss it as long as you don't use my name or something like that. So it's always really interesting to kind of put these stories out there so that people can see what's going on up north.
Indeed. I there's something about, to me, coming from Australia, colder climes are always more mysterious and weirder to me. And I mean, I'm lucky enough now to live in one. Like, we have brutal winters here in Wisconsin. I get to see 4 proper seasons that I never really got to see in Sydney, Australia. But there's something eerier about the north. And an example would be, because I think you were involved in a project recently about the Wendigo. That's something which always terrified me when I was in Australia. Now I'm in Wendigo territory, and I know you're kind of Wendigo territory as well, right?
Oh, very much so. And Alberta is where I am, is actually home to some of the most famous stories about the Wendigo. And it's taken very, very seriously here. I have to say, like, many of these creatures and cryptids that maybe if you go elsewhere, they might say, oh, it's a story. Not here. Here, this is something that's very real to people. And in the case of the Wendigo, I have to say it's become very real to me as well. I live about 20 minutes from the small mission where the very famous Swift Runner case actually took place. And it's a very disturbing story. Of course, it's probably one of the foundational stories for many of the much of the Wendigo lore that we hear. And for those who aren't familiar with it, it was a case where a Cree trapper by the name of Swift Runner actually murdered and ate his family, his wife, his children, in extremely cold winter. But what they found within that case, which was really interesting, was the fact that they actually had a very prosperous hunting season. And one of the things about Wendigo cases that many anthropologists have always put forward has been the fact that, well, people do extreme things in extreme times. And if people are starving, then sometimes this happens. And that wasn't the case with Swift Runner. And so it's brought up a lot of questions, and it's very interesting to sort of go through Alberta and figure out, like, first of all, how many stories there are about Wendigo, but also how many landmarks are either named after a Wendigo sighting or after someone who dealt with a Wendigo encounter, such as some of the settlers that came in. So it's very, very interesting here, but it's taken extremely seriously.
Is it something which people still report today? Like, do people still report Wendigo encounters in 2025 or recently?
Believe it or not, yeah. We had not that long ago a horrific incident in Manitoba. Many people remember this, which was the Greyhound bus case, where a fellow by the name of Vince Lee had attacked somebody that was sitting next to him in a Greyhound bus and decapitated him and proceeded to eat him on the bus. And that case, interestingly enough, the fellow who was eventually arrested and charged, there was a lot of story around that about, okay, he's got a mental illness and things like that, which I mean I think is relatively clear. But what was really fascinating was that a fellow by the name of Nathan Carlson, who was a research anthropology at the University of Alberta, wrote an article about the Wendigo and the Swift Runner case and just the psychology of Wendigo psychosis and the Wendigo phenomenon, and it was published in the newspaper the same day that this attack actually happened.
Wow.
And this poor guy really took it upon himself and blamed himself for potentially invoking Wendigo or something along those lines in order to create the snowball effect of this attack. So right down in the base of a lot of these stories, you still find that Wendigo lore. There's an abandoned hospital here in Edmonton as well, which has been rumored to have held the first Wendigo possession case in the city. And interestingly enough, my family doctor, who I used to have, I believe he's retired now, but my family doctor was actually one of the doctors who sat in on said exorcism at the hospital. So there's a lot going on right here in old Canada. People think it's just this land of ice and snow and extreme heat in the summer, and let me tell you, there is a lot of vast wilderness here that we got a lot of exploring to do, and we don't know a whole lot about.
Before we get back into Canada, which is what we want to do, something then you said was particularly interesting to me, who's always interested in the sociological or psychological influences and intersections with the paranormal and how we think about it. As you said, the journalist or the writer who penned that Wendigo story, in a way, blamed himself for perhaps that event. Is that something you've seen, not necessarily people blaming themselves, but because I know how much experience you've had in this space, do you often see it perhaps us as humans creating or co-creating or encouraging the phenomenon that we deal, or the phenomena that we deal with?
Oh, absolutely. And what's really fascinating to me about that idea is that we're seeing more and more of that being proven within the scientific and parapsychology community, is the fact that so much of what we're experiencing is something that we are projecting. And many people argue that this might be something where the thought becomes the thinker. You focus enough on something and it becomes conscious, which again leans to the whole notion of the old David Chalmers hard problem. Is the consciousness in the brain, or is this something that is outside the brain and that the brain is channeling? And if it is, well, then maybe that's exactly what's going on, is that consciousness doesn't actually need the brain to operate independently. So there's a lot that's going on, especially when we look at cases like the Wendigo, which has not been jammed into the I think that psychological box of it, it's got to be a mental illness, because that simply hasn't been proven yet. And they really like to throw around terms like Wendigo psychosis and things like that. But at the end of the day, there's not been real evidence that that's the case. And I'll make a point to that, which is there was a case, and I believe it was up north in Alberta. The name of the town escapes me. If Chad Lewis was here, I'm sure he'd be able to tell me what it was. But the case was interesting because it was two sisters that actually came down with what would be labeled as Wendigo psychosis. And when they were given hot tallow to drink, along with some of the other rituals that were going on, it cured them. and it never came back. These symptoms never came back. And mental illness doesn't work like that. If you've got some sort of a psychosis, then that takes treatment. That takes proper treatment. It doesn't go away with a glass of tallow. So there's a lot that there's many questions that are going on right now about this subject, and Wendigo just fits into that category. So I think psychologically we have to keep looking at it. But what people are seeing when they're encountering this thing, is this something that we've as a people have focused enough on to to create something that is tangible and physical and thinking, or is this something from somewhere else? It's really up for grabs at this point.
No, I love everything you said, and I always love your insight and your analysis. And I wonder, just riffing on some of that, if perhaps the paranormal or the experiences people have, where I think we're often so bogged down in this desire to work out what the phenomenon is. Like, is there really a Wendigo? Are there really grey extraterrestrials visiting us? Are there really deceased relatives, haunting the back, corridors of the family estate? Are there really hairy hominids running around the woods? But perhaps these things actually teach us, perhaps the real value of it is our experiences might teach us something about us, whether it's our psychology. That isn't to say none of it's real or none of it's objectively separate from us, but I tend to think there might be value in looking at this to help understand us better.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. And I mean, anytime you look at folklore or legends or anything like that, there's always a kernel of truth in there. It's really easy to kind of dismiss this stuff and be like, oh, it's a fairy story that keeps kids in at night, things like that, or the Wendigo is just an analogy for greed and consumption, or things, which, I mean, yes, there's stories that have branched off of this that do address those things. But what's interesting, when you look at cases like the Wendigo, or even go over to the Pine Barrens in New Jersey, look at the Jersey Devil, and in 1909 terrorized this town. What's interesting is that when you go back to the root of these stories, there is often something that has happened, and the stories have branched off from it, rather than the stories happen and then people start seeing it. Case in point, the Jersey Devil, where you had, of course, 1908, 1909, the town basically goes into lockdown because they're like, something's on the roof. Well, if you go back a little bit further with the Jersey Devil, what's interesting about that is that the locals, the indigenous people of the area, known as the Pineys, and they were actually saying that the name of the Pine Barrens itself actually translates into the place of the dragon. So there's what creates that. There's something there. People were seeing something beforehand, and then the stories like Mother Leeds, and it was this cursed child that flew up the chimney, comes a lot later. And we see that in Canada a lot, where there's a lot of stories, whether they be indigenous stories or like local legends and stuff like that seem to sprout up afterwards. But when you go right back to the beginning, there's something there that people are trying to understand, and they're using stories to try to understand it.
Yeah, I do think that somehow these things give us an insight into us. I love that you mentioned Chad Lewis earlier, and we were talking about the Wendigo. And ironically, just last week, myself, my girlfriend, two of our daughters, and one of their friends were doing a legend tripping adventure around the backwoods of central Wisconsin with 3 of Chad Lewis's books and with one
Excellent.
of Linda Godfrey's. But you wrote the foreword, I think. So was it was it the Wendigo book you wrote the foreword to? Or was
No,
it
it was
the Winter
it was
Legend?
his Christmas one. Yeah.
Can you tell us, I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit about that. And it doesn't matter whether it's the Wendigo or, like you said, the Christmas one. There is something about, again, where we live, where you live and where I live now. There's something about the cold. There's something about snow. There's something about the viciousness of the seasonal changes, which I think shapes mythology here, or shapes even perhaps experience here. I mean, obviously it shapes day-to-day experience, particularly in the pre-modern period where so many of these tales come from. But I do think the seasonality, the stark winters here, and the the significance of the fall and what it means, what's going to come after. I do think it's affected a lot of maybe just our tales, but maybe the phenomenon and our experiences itself.
I love that, because I think you're spot on. And one of the things that many people that have not come up to Canada, specifically Alberta, don't realize is the vastness that's here. And our cold isn't even American cold. We have a whole other level of cold that we define in the winter. And we have really, really hot summers, and our cold is just as extreme. And it's nothing for here to become minus 40, minus 50 easily Celsius. And it's, and here in Canada, even though our cities are, they're vast and populous and busy and active, we have a lot of expanse between those cities. And the further north you go, the less there is. There's smaller communities that do a lot of hard work and power the rest of the country. We have some amazing small communities, but they are few and far between each other. It's nothing to be able to drive 5-6 hours in Alberta, and you still, A, you haven't hit the end of Alberta, and B, you haven't seen anyone for the 5-6 hours you're in the car. So we have a lot of vast terrain, and when it's cold, it can be very isolating, especially in these rural communities. So I think not only does that lend to the opportunity for storytelling, but it also, I think, lends the opportunity to explore a different mentality. There's a mentality you have to live within that. So, and I know even myself, like I've had friends come from other parts of Canada that maybe aren't as cold as Alberta can get, and they're going, how the hell do you live here? Like what is going on? So I think there's a different mentality to it, and it gives, if these, these beings, whether they be physical or energetic or whatever this is, or I guess both, it's a whole different level of terrain, of being able to be here without being seen much of the year. We have a lot of Sasquatch encounters up here, a lot of Dogman, a lot of just pretty much everything. And it's really no wonder, because as I say, you can drive for 5 hours and not see somebody. So, I mean, what a perfect spot for anything that didn't want to be seen to thrive.
Indeed. You mentioned Dogman then, and I know so much of the audience of the Untold Radio Network are fascinated with Dogman. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about some Dogman stories or Dogman experiences from Canada, since it's, again, Canada Day.
Yeah, absolutely. They are hands down my favorite, sort of cryptid, I guess, in Canada. We have a long history here with them. And it goes back to the indigenous tribes, many of them in British Columbia, who would actually were said to trade with them as another individual tribe. So the history goes back a very, very, very long time, probably long before it's even been documented. And I mean, here in Alberta, they're seen, I would say not a huge amount, but enough if you know where to go. And I mean, I personally, as well as friends of mine, have had just absolutely incredible encounters with them. They're very much looking for connection with people, and to rebuild, I think, the connection that had been damaged by settlers coming in, 100 or 150 some odd years ago. So they are very, very remarkable, very shy creatures that get a horribly bad rap from society and are terribly misunderstood. Even within the population here in Canada, they can be very misunderstood. We've had people that have said, no, they're evil, that's it. And I mean, that has not been my experience at all. I'll tell you a brief story of something that happened to me while I've been out in one of these hotspots. A group that I was with, some very dear friends of mine, we had been out looking at, we'd been out for something else, and I can't remember what it was at this moment. But long story short, we ended up having this amazing encounter with the only thing that you can, an upright canid. I mean, it's on 2 feet. It was very, very interested in connecting with us. We were out on a very dense wooded path. We did not expect to be seeing him at all. And lo and behold, he made eye contact with us, these bright, bright, bright diamond-like eyes. And the more we encouraged connection and encouraged that communication, the more interested it was in coming towards us. We just stayed as calm as we possibly could. And within a very short amount of time, he heard a dog barking from a neighboring property and ended up running off. But it was a really, really phenomenal encounter, and just no maliciousness, pure curiosity. It was really, really quite amazing. So yeah, nothing bad to say about them whatsoever. And they're kicking around. They're kicking around here in Alberta. It's amazing.
That is fascinating. Just out of curiosity, and this is probably only going to be a shortish response, I imagine, but do people there call them Dogman as well in Canada? Is that the phrase there as well, or is there a different one? Or
yeah, no, Dogman seems to be a sort of the generic phrase. A lot of people don't know what they're looking at here, which has been interesting. At one point, we had put out a notice in a small community that we'd been noticing that there had been sightings, and we'd been tracking them for a little bit. And just as soon as the notice went out, there were messages coming in from these rural farms saying, "Oh no, we saw one take a sheep, and their livestock has been depleted, and they opened the chicken coop because," and of course they've got fingers, so they're noticing that the chicken coop's been physically opened with hands, and chickens taken out and whatnot. And the one fellow who contacted us, he said his wife wouldn't even discuss it, wouldn't even talk about it, but he was willing to tell a story. And it's because one had been on his property for quite some time. So just funny little things like that where people they don't really want to talk about it. They don't really know what they're seeing, but if you describe it to them, they'll be like, "Oh yeah, that's what we saw." And so when you say Dogman, they're like, "Yep, that fits." I don't know how common the discussions are again in Canada, because we do have that weird sort of cultural barrier of like, no, don't say anything because you're going to look crazy. But if you mention it, they sure as hell know what you're talking about.
Dang, I lost some chicks from my coop recently. I wonder if it was Dogman. I'm not even kidding. We literally lost 8 chicks. Who knows? I'm Dogman territory as well. I'm Wisconsin, like this and it's Minnesota, right, is where the stories were born by Linda Godfrey and other people. So who knows?
Very well could be. I mean, we had there was a horse that had been attacked here, and then when he couldn't catch the horse, he ended up taking a look at the chicken coop, and the horse thankfully made it, but was severely injured. Oh. And I mean, they're hunters. They're hunters, and they're very wolf-like, but incredibly intelligent, like unbelievably intelligent. And I think we take it for granted that these are not just mindless evil things. My experience has been they are absolutely not either. And yeah, very, very interested in connection, as long as you're coming into it with the right energy. I mean, if you're frightened and you're running and you're not gonna, the incident's not gonna end well. But if you can come into it with that positive, positive energy, gentle energy, we often would start the encounters with either a smudge, because my friends are Métis. So we would start with a smudge to say thank you. In Canada, smudges aren't for warding things off. They're actually for saying thank you and giving back. So we start with that, thank you. Here's our offering. We appreciate you. We would love to have you here. And more often than not, if you're in the right place at the right time, something will go on. But they're looking for that connection. But I think they're also, they were burned, I think, back in the day when the settlers came in, and they're cautious. So we have to honor that.
Indeed. Do you think, what do you think they are? I know when you mentioned cryptids before, you were reluctant. I could tell you were reluctant to use the word cryptid when you said Dogman. Yeah. I understand that reluctance, but maybe some of the audience don't. what do you think they're? Do you think they're physical, or do you think they're spiritual, or a combination, or what's? I mean, I guess we're a combination. Humans are physical and spiritual, but I'm trying to make the point of: do you think they're just another wild creature in the woods, or are they something more metaphysical or stranger than that?
I think they're stranger than that. We actually had at one point, the one encounter we had, we were walking down one of the trails, and one of the women that were walking ahead of us got huffed at, like how a dog, or if you hear like a husky actually woof at somebody, got huffed at, and to the point where she actually felt her hair blow. And on the camera, because we were walking behind, we actually saw this burst of smoke, and it was like this whole thing burst into smoke, which you hear repeatedly from other cases where these dogmen are seen as black mists or things like that. And we saw this smoke kind of erupt with her passing in front of it. So there's something else. There's something else. And I mean, and I definitely don't pretend to have all the answers as to what it is. The best that I've been able to explain it, I guess, in my own poor realm of understanding, is that I think, Dean, like you touched on, everybody's on a continuum of physical and non-physical. And I think that continuum, you can be maybe a little bit closer to physical than non-physical, and so on and so forth. And I think these guys, they seem to have mastered that ability. And they're definitely not, they can interact with us. I've seen them close enough that you can see, I mean, clearly there's fur, there's color in the fur. They've been here long enough that they've adapted for color, because for everybody who, if you don't know how fur color happens, it's actually environmentally caused, and adapted from the environment. So they've got fur color that makes sense. But I don't think that they stay within our realm of perception, and I don't know how they do that. So it's a bit of a mystery. We've seen some pretty weird things out here, so it's a bit of a mystery still.
It's just fascinating. I love your different take and your experiences with Dogman. It always fascinates me. While we're in Canada, and while we're with these cryptids, a cryptid that a lot of people think of in popular Bigfoot circles, Bigfoot or Sasquatch, and that term comes from Canada, it comes from British Columbia. A lot of people tend to think of those as just an undiscovered North American great ape or hominid, or relict hominid in running around the woods. But my take, and I don't want to poison what you say, and if you think differently, feel free to disagree, because that's what I love. But what do you think Sasquatch is similar to your take on Dogman then? Like, can you maybe talk a little bit about Sasquatch, and maybe even some Canadian stories and what your take on it is?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, huge here. All across, of course, we've got our fair share of the Rocky Mountains here. And so all across Canada, there are Sasquatch stories, Alberta and BC being two of the biggest hotspots. And the further north you go, the more you get. We've got an amazing old coal mine up here in northern Alberta called Nordegg. And Nordegg is probably one of the biggest hotspots where hunters see Sasquatch regularly. Interestingly enough, we also have them coming very close to the cities. Edmonton, which is the capital city in Alberta, and the furthest northernmost populated city, interestingly enough, has a river valley which runs right through the middle of our city. We have one of the most green space in any city in Canada, I believe. I think it's still the most green space. But so we have this river valley, and interestingly enough, through the North Saskatchewan River, people have actually seen Sasquatch tracks coming right through the river valley, which is like right through the middle of Edmonton. So they're coming down from wherever. We've got sightings from all over the place. It's really, really interesting. And there's definitely areas where you can go and hear them pretty close to on the regular. My friends and I on multiple occasions have been out. Interestingly enough, in search of Dogman and end up hearing Sasquatch. So everything from tree knocking, lots of whooping, and on one occasion found an interesting set of tracks. Now, what's really fascinating about this is what we were just talking about. So what are they? On one piece of property where the tracks had been found, we found something that was really, really interesting. Now, oftentimes you hear people talking about, well, I followed these Sasquatch tracks and in the middle of the field, they just up and disappeared. Well, we had actually started following what looked like deer tracks, lots of wildlife here in Alberta, tons. We saw deer tracks, and we're following these deer tracks down to this sort of swampy area. And the deer tracks stopped, and we saw elk tracks. And we're like, okay, that's really weird. Where the heck did the deer go? We're following the elk tracks down. The elk tracks turn into moose tracks. Now, moose tracks, if nobody has seen a moose, you're looking at nearly the size of half a dinner plate for the size of a moose track compared to a deer. So moose are massive. And the moose tracks sunk into the mud, oh my gosh, at least 4 to 5 inches, because moose are they're huge, they're heavy. And so the closer we got to the creek bed, we're noticing this massive depth of track, which makes sense for the size of the moose. Where did the moose come from? We don't know. We were still following the elk tracks. Interestingly enough, the moose tracks disappeared, and what was in their place were Sasquatch tracks. And we were mind blown by what we were seeing. We didn't know what to think. Now, what was weird about this is, as if that wasn't weird enough, what was weird about this was that the tracks, typical about 18 inches long, the typical Sasquatch track that you'd expect to find, the moose tracks had sunk in, that 4 to 5 inches. The Sasquatch tracks were sitting on the surface of the mud. They maybe dipped in possibly an inch. And that made no sense, to the point where one of the ladies that was with us actually took off her shoe. She was about 4'11", and put her weight on the same spot where these tracks were found, and she ended up to her ankle in mud. So how could something that size make an inch indentation into the mud, and somebody that's that small end up sinking it? It was very remarkable. The tracks are bizarre. We ended up getting a lot of photos and whatnot of these, but it was very strange. And so what these things are, your guess is as good as mine, but I sure as heck don't think they're as physical as what we'd like to think they are.
That's fascinating. It's funny because there's so many Bigfoot stories where people will say, well, they must have been, 800 pounds to have left, track marks. But your story says the opposite. And it coincides with those type of stories that talk about footprints walking into the middle of the field and they just disappear. Like there's something, like you talked about Dogman, there seems to be something with whatever this, I don't want to say beast, whatever this thing is or whatever this phenomenon is, that it behaves very much like so much of these things do, whether it's Bigfoot or Dogman or, again, ghosts or ET visitors. There seems to be this weird correlate to me. Like there seems to be this space that all of these things exist in, which people have these experiences. They can sometimes fundamentally change their lives forever. Yeah. But the things themselves never seem to be tangible. They seem to not operate within our understanding of the laws of physics, as your description of those tracks then perfectly demonstrates.
Yeah, and what's interesting, again, like sort of taking this back to the lore side, which we were talking about before, is that in First Nations lore here in Alberta, they are known as spiritual shapeshifters. So here we've got something that, on the surface, what is a shapeshifter? What is all of that? I don't know. I have no idea. And yet I'm seeing something that I don't understand and I can't explain. So I think a lot of these stories, or in a lot of these cases, we really have to go back to the original lessons that we're being given on perhaps what these things are. Now, do shapeshifters exist? I don't know. But again, where's the kernel of truth in the the mythology and the stories. And I think there's something that's going on here that we don't understand. I don't understand it. I don't proclaim to understand it. I just report what I've seen. And there's something that's going on here that is beyond our understanding currently of what's happening. In these hotspot areas, like the ones that I've been talking about, we've got quite a number of them here in Canada. In these areas, we've got weird spikes in electromagnetics that don't make sense, that can't be tracked. We've got these bright lights that people are seeing that, I mean, I've seen them myself open up and then close. So like, what is that? Are we looking at some sort of a portal? Are we looking for some sort of energy discharge? What is going on? I don't think any of us have a clue.
I always know that I'm talking to a kindred spirit when there's a lack of certainty about what these things are. It's always so frustrating to me, and not to put anybody down, but there are people who are so certain. They know all of the answers. They know what Bigfoot is. They know what Dogman is. And I'm not sure how they know or how anybody could know, because if anybody actually knew, the problem would be put to bed.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem to be being put to bed anytime soon. And it doesn't seem like anytime. I was talking to a friend of mine, Jason McLean, who again used to do, I was talking about it in the intro, he used to do Mysterious Library with me on the Untold Radio Network, and he's one of the hosts of the Crossing Realms Conference. But we've been investigating these things for so long, like the UFO phenomenon we've been looking at now for going on 77 years or something, 78 years. The Bigfoot phenomenon even longer, ghosts and hauntings, good Lord, forever. But we don't seem to be closer to getting a handle on any of these things. Now, you as somebody who's, I mean, you're almost like paranormal royalty. Your family have been involved in this forever. You've been involved in this for a very long time. Do you think we're actually going to be able to catch this tiger by the tail? Like, is it something we're ever going to be able to pin down and work out what it is?
It's a good question. Yeah, it's a good question. I think we will have a better understanding of it, but I think it's going to mean our own evolution in terms of how we're thinking about the world. And I think the more, and it's happening, like I can even see it happening within the scientific community because it's coming. But I think it's this putting down of the materialistic view, and being able to slowly see the world in a way where we can get past the physicality of what we're looking at, which is really hard for people just in general. I mean, it's hard for everybody because here we are in a world where we rely on our physical senses to determine our path forward. Like, what are we doing today? Well, I've got to brush my teeth, so I got to pick up a toothbrush. But I think the more we can understand that there is something outside of the senses that we're not perceiving, I think the more is getting, for lack of a better word, revealed, because we're seeing these sightings and encounters. They're increasing, like they're getting more. People are coming out in droves talking about this. I mean, we see it in documentaries now where, it's easy to go into some of these towns and interview these people, and almost everybody has a story. Like, I don't know if that would have happened 50 years ago. And so I think the revelations are coming, but I think because we are non-physical beings living in a very physical world, it's going to take the evolution of us in order to continue the sort of the revelation of what's going on around us. I don't think it's going to be something where it's going to be discovered in a lab. I don't think it's going to be something where, I've got video proof of whatever this is. I don't think that's happening. But I think the further we go along and the more we understand our own sense of non-physicalness in this world, I think more will begin to start to make sense. But I really don't think it's going to be something where, somebody comes in with some proof of evidence where it's like, oh, I've got a Bigfoot. I think people are going to be waiting a long time for that.
Yes, so do I, actually.
Yeah.
Given that it's Canada Day, are there any other Canadian folklore stories or any other Canadian cryptids, or are there things that particularly interest you about your part of the world and the mysterious and the folkloric that we haven't touched on? I'm sure there's hundreds, but is there something particularly that you'd like to talk about today?
Oh gosh. Well, there is so much here. Right down from lake monsters. I mean, we've got our fair share of those here in Canada as well. We got our own version of Nessie as the Ogopogo and Lake Okanagan, and there's quite a few others. We've got there's so much here, and one of the things that I have really benefited from has been listening to the Indigenous people here, good friends of mine, talk about their own experiences with some of this stuff. And one that really stood out to me, one of my best friends told me this story years ago where she actually encountered what she felt was a little person. And this was really interesting because little people in the Indigenous communities, very, very real, very similar to things like leprechauns, that kind of I guess, trickster type being, and something that I'd never really put too much thought to. And she actually told me the story where she had been sitting in her car the one night and she had looked down at the side of her vehicle because she heard something on the side near the side of her car and saw one standing next to her vehicle. Now, like, I didn't know what to make of this years ago. I was like, this is just bizarre. And then it disappeared. Once she had seen it, it kind of looked at her and it vanished. Interestingly enough, not that long later, my mom, who is not Indigenous, she had been out with her cat downtown Edmonton, and near this little park area. And there was an empty lot where this house used to be, and the tree that had been there for quite a long time. And she looked over at this tree from across the road, and she ended up phoning me and saying, there was what I could only describe as a small person standing underneath this tree, and it looked like a gnome. And I was like, what? Like, what the heck are you talking about? And she said, when I went back to look, because she said it baffled me so much that I went back to look and it was gone. Now, as I've gone along, especially with my friend who saw the one in her car, she now has stuff going on in her backyard, which faces onto this field, where if she leaves something out, I mean, and as I say, there's nothing in behind her house. She's noticing things moved around on her deck. She's heard everything from pattern type knocking, hearing feet out on the stoop running around. Nobody's out there. Really interesting thing. So the more that I learn from the old stories and the sort of the old way, the more I'm coming to understand the place that I live. It's really, really cool. So I don't know. There's lots here. I mean, we could be talking about this for the next 2 hours and we still probably wouldn't get done with it. But it's so interesting. There's so much.
That's why I need to have you on the show more often. Speaking of gnomes and little people, and I mean, I'm fascinated with fairy lore. As anybody who's a regular viewer of this show or of the Old Mysterious Library, I can talk about fairy faith until the cows come home. It's literally after UFOs, which are probably my wheelhouse. My next interest wheelhouse is fairy faith. Do you think those things come over with the people who settled? Like, I'm always interested. Do they travel with us? Like, if things like gnomes you might associate more, or fairies more with the old country, with the British Isles or perhaps somewhere else in Europe, did they come with us, or did they come with us? Again, I guess it becomes the psychosocial question. Did they come with us physically, or did they come with us psychologically? Or
I honestly think that, again, it comes back to what I was talking about at the beginning, where I think we're seeing the same phenomenon again and again in different places, and the stories are being born from seeing the phenomenon. And we see this in parapsychology all the time too, where, for example, like poltergeist activity or things like that get written off in, say, for example, in religious context, they've got a meaning in the religious sense. But then if you talk to somebody who may be a Buddhist, they might have a different explanation for that. But when it comes down to it, we're looking at the same thing. And I think that's what's going on in a lot of these cases as well. So I don't think it's necessarily migrating, but these different stories are kind of springing up. Like, case in point being something like the Rougarou. Here you've got something that is clearly described as what we know as a dogman, right? With great big ears and on 2 feet and very similar behaviors. But the story around it is a little bit different. The story around it is somebody got cursed and then they were able to turn into this Rougarou and so on and so forth, where in other parts of Canada or the US or even Europe, there's no body transformation of these things, right? They stay as they are. They stay these giant canids. But we see that sort of transformational element again in certain indigenous lore, like skinwalkers and things like that. So there seems to be this sort of these red threads that trail a lot of this phenomenon together. And I think the more we look at those commonalities, the more we're going to see. So I don't think it's necessarily that the stories are maybe even coming from one place or another, but people are seeing things, and when we see something we don't understand, we usually try to write a story around it. And I think that's what's going on.
That's just fascinating. You know what we didn't talk about yet, and I didn't even mention in your intro, are your books. Like you have a couple of books, at least I know. You have Teaching the Living, and you have The Gift of Instinct. Right. Did you want to talk a little bit about those and what, I mean, just quickly, and what's in them and where people can get a hold of them?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So Teaching the Living, which is, hey, it's always back here. Teaching the Living was based on the program actually that I would often teach when I was still doing post-secondary, and I still base a lot of my workshops on it and things like that. And it's essentially the idea that our thoughts really do create a reality. And Teaching the Living was designed as a program to really help people gain insight as to why they're experiencing the paranormal phenomenon they're experiencing. Many times we kind of think to ourselves, this is all happening outside of us. This is something that's being asserted on us. You know, my father had problems and my grandmother had problems and so on and so forth. And well, it's just being afflicted on me. And we know now through so many rigorous studies from people like Dr. William Roll and Dean Radin and all these, that's simply just not true. We know that what we're seeing is an outside experience of whatever we've got going on emotionally and consciously. And sometimes it's connecting in with loved ones that have passed away, but sometimes it's an outward response to what we've going on internally. So Teaching the Living is all about that. It's about, if you want to figure out the root cause of why you're having so much trouble with the paranormal, this is how to do it. And it's not going to give you any fancy wave of the magic wand and fix your situation. It's going to get you to do the work. But we go through cases, we go through studies, we go through the works. It's a fun read, and it's just it guaranteed by the end of it you will have a plan to deal with whatever you're dealing with.
Wow. And The Gift of Instinct.
The Gift of Instinct. Yeah, The Gift of Instinct. There we go. And it's got my little baby on it, so there's that too. So it's got Galen on it. Yeah, it's got Galen on it, and it's got Galen on it for a reason. There's some stories about him in the book, but The Gift of Instinct is all about
Galen. For the listeners, is your baby, your snake? He is. What kind of snake is Galen?
He's a ball python. He actually just turned 21 at the beginning of June.
Wow.
Yeah. So he's like, yeah, it's great. He was very happy to see this. But The Gift of Instinct is really all about the idea that if you feel like there is some sort of a calling for you, that it's about understanding the instinct of following it, being able to tap into whatever that is through connecting more with non-physical, being able to connect more with your passion, to connect more with the spirits around us, to talk, being able to really pursue a passion and know that there's something more to this world that you're here for. And that's really, really what this is. So it's about standing on the shoulders of giants. We talk about people like J.B. Rhine in the book. There's like multiple lessons. It's all lessons that I've learned throughout my career in this, that I had to really get my head around and understand. Everything we talk about, folklore, where it comes from, why it's important. But it's a collection of lessons, really, and understanding the deeper awareness that we call consciousness and how it leads us forward. It really, really does lead us forward, and will bring you to where you need to be if you trust it. So that's what the gift of instinct is.
And so, teaching the living and the gift of instinct both available on, I guess, Amazon. Can people find
Amazon, Barnes and Noble, chapters for Canada? Yeah, you name it. They're out there, but they're on my website as well. So it's a one-stop shop for everything.
And just for people who are listening, although I will put this link within the show notes, what is your website?
So the website is entityseeker.ca. And from there, you can literally get everything. It's got interviews, podcast links, books, all the things. Even Chad Lewis's one book is the Winter Legends and Lore. So that's on there too. But so yeah, there's tons on there, and you won't get bored. It's a bit of a rabbit hole.
They definitely will not get bored. And supernatural circumstances. I mean, I'm on the Untold Radio Network, so I shouldn't have favorite podcasts, but I do. One of them is on this network, and it's Down South Anomalies by my very good friends in Australia, Jay Katz and Aspasia. It's an amazing show. I'm getting to yours last, so I'm getting there, Morgan. The other one is the Paracast with Gene Steinberg and Tim Schwartz, which is a good show. It's an incredible show. And the other one is Supernatural Circumstances, your show, which is just amazing. How do people, again, just talk a little bit about your show and how people can see that or listen?
Thank you. Yeah, it's you can literally get it on any podcast platform, everything from iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple, you name it, you will find it. Google Supernatural Circumstances and it will come up for you somewhere. I highly hope that people want to take the ride, because it's not going to be your typical ghost hunty, scary stories podcast. This is a podcast for people that want to take this stuff to the next level. They want to understand things better. They want to be able to get into the nitty gritty and the meat of the discussion rather than sort of keeping it on that fluff level. And it's an adventure. This is something you can really throw yourself into, as I say, with some of the best guests imaginable we've had, and including you. Have been many times, and as people like Dr. Eben Alexander we've had on multiple times to talk about near-death experiences. Matt Baglio, who originally wrote the movie The Rite with Anthony Hopkins, we've had him on to talk about exorcism. We've had just really incredible guys and amazing women. So yeah, please come join us. We're a bi-weekly show, and we'd love to have everybody.
I love that whole without the fluff, because it's so true. Supernatural Circumstances has zero fluff. Thank you so much for joining me today and hanging out with me for the last hour, Morgan. You're always an absolute delight to talk to.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This has been awesome and such a great conversation, and happy Canada Day, everybody.
Happy Canada Day, indeed. Until I talk to you again, Morgan, which might be like in a minute in the green room post-show to do the standard guest debrief. You are wonderful. And until I talk to everybody else, which will be, I hope, same weird time, same weird network, the Untold Radio Network, next week at 9 p.m. Central, Tuesdays. Please keep it weird.